nature, things of that 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 nature.
And welcome into the Pod of That Nature special live stream, reacting to Sam PIttman as he speaks for the first time in over a week about signing day and Liberty Bowl. Actually, we don't care about that. It's more about the other things that we're going to talk about. But I'm John Neighbors alongside Curtis Wilkerson and Andrew Ellis, and just got done hearing from Sam PIttman, and we're going to play some clips from that and obviously have some reactions to that. But if you want to watch the press conference in its entirety, do that afterwards on Inside Arkansas, because it is posted. So, but fellas, before we start playing some clips and getting into the in-depth thing, just overall generic, how'd you feel about Sam PIttman and the press conference, the job he did, and how he handled everything?
I thought he was fairly honest with some of the stuff that he said there, which was refreshing. I walked away from it, told you guys before we started, with mixed emotions. Some of the things he said made sense. Some of the things that he said afterwards were pretty contradictory. But what it sounds to me like is they have money, but they don't have money relative to their peers. And so they're really having to make a lot of business decisions on, is it worth it to pay the asking price for some of these guys we have coming back off a 6-6 football team? He said that over and over, the 6-6 thing. Or do we really think we can go out there and upgrade in the portal? And from the looks of it, they feel like they can upgrade in the portal because they haven't been paying a bunch of guys because they're all freaking leaving. So it's very interesting, but he's putting a lot of stock into the, hey guys, be patient and see me in a couple weeks once we start adding some bodies, and we'll see how you feel then.
Yeah, there was plenty that Sam said in this press conference that I perfectly have no issue with, where I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And to your point, I think he was honest with a lot of it. And there's a lot that I can get behind. Mostly the main message, if I can just cut through, if I can paraphrase the 35, 40-minute press conference, it was, we've had a mass exodus. Some of that was our decision. We just didn't feel like the guys, we didn't want to pay them what they were asking for. Or he did also let it slip a couple times, can't pay. There were some times where he said, hey, we opted. We thought that guy wasn't worth it. And he didn't go into specifics. He didn't say, hey, Kudos, he wanted this. We didn't pay it. But he did say there was a few times where he said we kind of made that decision. But then there were a couple times where he said some people wanted stuff that we couldn't give, which I felt like was pretty telling. And you can kind of, if you just look at Arkansas's list of who's exited, you can kind of do the math and figure out who are the ones that they quote unquote couldn't pay and who are the ones that they didn't want to pay. But the big overarching message that Sam PIttman relayed here today was, we know we've had a mass exodus. We think we have a plan in place to replace these guys. We have 29 guys in, planned for visits upcoming, and obviously can't say their names. But he feels like rather than paying for the guys to retain his roster, he feels like that money could be better spent in the portal. And so, look, I'm sure there's some fans who have their opinions on that. I have my opinion on it. He wants everybody to kind of wait and see what they generate in the portal and then judge from there, which, again, we've kind of said that's the X factor. We will let this play out and we will make our big picture takeaways then. So ultimately, like, I can sympathize and understand a lot of it, but I did not come away from this press conference being overwhelmingly confident that Arkansas is about to go out there and build a very talented roster through the transfer portal. And also, if you just look at some of the guys that they're bringing in on visits, some nice players, some pieces that they need, but it's not necessarily the type of guys that are going to replace 2 and 3 year starters that they let go.
Yeah, I felt like, from the temperature, say if the Razorback fandom and temperature of everything was at 110 degrees, this press conference lowered it slightly, but just not a whole lot. Like, you're talking about going from 110 maybe to 95, 100. Still high up there, still some concerns, but still it was at least nice to kind of hear some things from the horse's mouth. And we'll have a few clips to play, folks. We'll start with kind of the lead off. It's kind of a longer clip, but just talking about the portal exits and everyone bouncing out, the current status of everything, and just having those losses, what that meant. Take a listen.
Been a lot of decision making. The portal comes 2 different ways. It comes by guys wanting to explore opportunities to go play somewhere where maybe they're not able to play here. There's the first one. The other one is financially. Obviously, they want to explore what their opportunities may be somewhere else financially. And then us as a staff, we've got to make all those decisions on whether the financial asking price is what we determine the value of the player is. And if it is, then we try to keep them here. If it's not, then obviously we wish them well. And if it's strictly about the financial piece, then we know at that point we'd be out of it. I do want to be very specific here. We have money. Our donors have been very good financially to us. Revenue sharing coming up here in July. We have money. We're not losing these kids because we don't have money. We're losing them because what our value is to what maybe they can get elsewhere has been at times substantially different. We were a 6-6 football team, and we've got money, and so we need to use it wisely. We have 29 visits already set up coming out of the portal. What's hard, I think, probably on the fan base is that we know more about who's in the portal than probably anybody does, the availability of us getting them. And so basically it comes down to those two things, Tom. And if we weren't able to match what the number was out there nationally for somebody, then we were saying, hey, we believe that we can go get somebody as good or somebody or two somebodies for that amount of money.
So
Okay.
a lot of unpack there, but I think the phrase, or at least the sentence that he said that stood out, was just what a lot of people ask and wonder about. We have the money. It's simply like, we got it. We got plenty. But then if you start seeing what's been going on and what's been happening and players leaving, and then it's like, well, some of them aren't just money. I think it goes back to the point you brought up, Andrew. If you're not if you have the money, but you're not spending it, or at least doing what it takes to spend it on the players that you want to keep around, then you're just assuming that you're going to go in the portal and get another Patrick Kudus or get another Luke Has. I mean, what is again, it sounds good in theory. I get it, and it's good to sound confident, and I'm glad that that's the case. But I'd feel a lot better about it if you were able to keep some of the key players that you could have next season, instead of just saying, hey, we'll go in there and we'll be fine because we got plenty of money.
This is one of the things that I had a hard time understanding, because I think the key to that entire phrase was him talking about where they value guys versus where they value themselves. And so you might disagree with, what Patrick Kudus came in there and asked you for, or Luke Has came in there and asked you for, or whatever. But then I just wonder what kind of pulse they have on the market here. So like, is it them overvaluing themselves, or you undervaluing them based on where the market is at with NIL now? So how confident are we that all of a sudden these guys who are going to come in on these 29 visits, that they have valued them then appropriately, comparatively speaking, to what other schools are and how they value themselves? Otherwise, we're going to be in the exact same situation, or they're going to wind up paying, lesser players the same amount of money they could have paid a really productive guy that they already had.
Yeah, I think that's a great point in terms of what the market value for all these guys are. And look, let's just be clear. I don't envy a lot of these coaches, because who the hell knows? Who really knows? If Patrick Kudus comes to you and says, hey, Ole Miss is about to give me $1 million, who are you to say that they're not going to? And that isn't the going rate for a top offensive guard in the portal. And so I agree, Curtis. It does seem like again, and also it's worth noting that there's so many different players. Because look, if it's a Nico Davier who comes to you and says, hey, I want X, you might look at Nico's numbers and say, okay, that's actually something we can live without. And so I get it on a case-by-case basis. You're trying to, again, figure out what the value is. I just think it's really tough to say, yeah, I think it's going to be better that we replace our entire roster. And again, we're kind of putting our own market value on what these guys are worth, and we're just going to let other teams overpay quote unquote for our players. It is just very interesting to me. And again, we'll see if they're going to be able to properly replace all this. I wonder if this is a ripple effect from last offseason when you had Blackstock literally sitting out of practices asking for more NIL money. Seems like they eventually caved and gave him more NIL money. I know Tyrone Broden missed some practices in the spring. I know there was a lot of rumors during spring ball that Arkansas's receivers might get poached. They ended up not getting poached. And so I'm wondering if last offseason they maybe bit the bullet and overpaid for some of these guys, and now they're a little bit hesitant, which is like perfectly normal and fine. The only problem is we can all agree overpaying for Keyshawn Blackstock isn't a good thing. Overpaying for Tyrone Broden isn't a good thing. When it's Luke Hasz and Patrick Kutas and Isaiah Satania, Jalen Braxton, TJ Metcalf, guys, again, that you know are productive SEC football players. Again, I don't know what these kids' asking prices are. And so, look, the coaching staff is well within their rights to say, you know what, we actually don't want to match that. But that's all fine and dandy. I just feel like I see a lot of people who cite last offseason. They're like, oh, remember when Chris Paul left and it was the end of the world? And it's like, well, yeah. And then Chris Paul went and played for Ole Miss and did a lot of very productive things. And it's like, yeah, I don't think, like, of all Ole Miss's issues, I don't think paying Chris Paul was their issue. And so, yeah, it is very interesting. So long story short, guys, like, Arkansas is going with the Moneyball approach. They are going to try and find the diamonds in the rough. They're going to try and find, he even said, we might even, instead of overpaying for one guy, we might be able to pay two guys, to replace that. Anytime you start hearing that kind of terminology and that kind of basis, you're not gonna have an increase in talent. Like, you're not going to have a super talented roster. Will Arkansas drop a bag and maybe get hopefully a star wide receiver or maybe a star defensive end here and there? We'll see. But ultimately, guys, like, what we're basically being told is we're supposed to just trust Sam Pittman and his coaching staff to go out there, sift through all these 3,600 portal guys, watch all the film, figure out the best way to distribute the money that they have left. And they're also going to have to do this without a GM, which, by the way, he was asked about that as well, because Arkansas is one of, I believe, 2 SEC teams that does not have a general manager for football. You just saw freaking Michael Lombardi get hired as the general manager at North Carolina. Like, that's a pretty notable one. And Sam says that they're okay without a GM now, but he says might get a GM in April. I feel like a GM would really help in this situation, as you are, again, trying to figure out what everyone's market value, what money you want to spend and all that. And so, look, like Sam Pittman said, give him some time. He's asking for patience, basically. See what the roster looks like. I'm more than willing to do that, but my stance has not changed, that I don't really see a path to Arkansas having a more talented roster.
I know we got a few more clips that we want to play, but I do just want to add to this point real quick about the value thing, is that one thing he said, and maybe we'll play it. He was like, no, like, some of these guys came in asking for 4 to 5 times what we anticipated. So again, I go back to, are these kids crazy or are you crazy in terms of how you're valuing them? Because that's a large disconnect, man. And he very literally said, like, we've got the money to where if there's a guy maybe we really want, that, you know, we could stretch and overpay. But then he very quickly admitted after that, like, but understand, guys, we're going to have to go out and, you know, just build out the roster too. So Moneyball. Oh yeah.
Well, and that was what was funny about it too, is knowing about guys getting approached that way and going into the portal. He said it, and I know we have some clips for it, but just to kind of address it, he was basically like, yeah, there will be opportunities. If they want to come back, they can come back. If they're in the portal, if they want to come back, if they left the right way, as he said, that they can come back. And so I'm just trying to read between the lines here. It makes me wonder if there's a set belief that somebody came to him, hey, I want X amount of dollars. No. Well, because this school is going to pay me X amount of dollars. Well, good luck. And kind of calling them on a bluff a little bit, and then seeing if they get there, will they have as much value as they think? And then knowing, man, I had a good at Arkansas, and I had some good NIL, and I really like my coaches. Well, if I'll just go back and see if I can still come back there. Maybe there's that, but guys, I'd just be hard pressed to think that there's a reason to believe in that, and a reason to believe that any of these players will just come back out of the portal. I get it, because it has happened before. It wouldn't be unprecedented of a player who entered the portal to come back, but still. A few things, though, as far as the players leaving, though. He was asked if he was surprised by some of, because I know we were. I know the fan base was. We were very surprised. Was Sam Pittman surprised by some of the players leaving into the portal?
There's been, I hate to talk specific kids, Andrew, and I appreciate the question. Yes, there's been several surprises. And then what you got to do is you got to figure out, is he, what's happening right now is the agents are just making random calls to schools saying, if Joey gets into the portal, how much would you pay him? And, what happens then, the agent gets back to the kid and says, hey, so-and-so will offer you X amount of dollars. And then the young man obviously wants to make money, and that's wonderful. That's what the portal's for. Then he comes in and says, hey, coach, whatever we agreed on, that's not the number. This is the number. And if you don't match it, then obviously they've already got security of another university. So I think I certainly would welcome any of those guys that did it the right way back, if that was a fallacy of their conversation with their agent. But yeah, there's been some guys that surprised me coming in saying that they're going to transfer. But most of the time it's about finances, and we have to make a decision on what we're willing to do coming off a 6-6 team.
So talking about players who, I think we can kind of understand which ones were the surprises, but going into it and saying he was surprised, but also most of them, it was financial related, of just, hey, I want this. And we looked at it saying, I don't know if we value that as much, or I don't know if we value you as much, whatever it is, that is, again, at least knowing that he was surprised, but financially driven seemed to be most of the cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that he also said was that he feels like when revenue sharing became a thing, that the asking prices automatically went up for players. And that was part of what he was talking about, just not necessarily really anticipating, going into some of these conversations. My question is, how did you not anticipate that? That's the first thing I thought of. Oh yeah, you're going to have a lot more money. Everybody knows that. And like, I've seen some people in the chat saying, don't these guys have agents who are kind of doing the work to determine what their representatives' values are? The answer is yes. And then that's such a surprising number, apparently, to the Arkansas coaching staff, that's part of why I'm skeptical, maybe is the word, or just like, I don't know how this is going to go in terms of them landing the guys they need to improve on what he continuously says is 6-6 football team.
Yeah, I would really like to get behind the process, like the mental process of, you have a 6-6 football team, so all these guys suck, and so why would I want to overpay for these guys whenever I could just like go out there and try and get my roster better? But again, we're saying that the coaching staff, the Arkansas coaching staff, has put their price tag on what they think these players are worth, and the players clearly view it differently. Other schools apparently view it differently, which is all fine and dandy. But again, I keep coming back to the fact that Arkansas is one of the only schools that doesn't have a GM, that doesn't have someone kind of facilitating these conversations, and again, starting to figure out what that value is for a lot of these guys. And so Sam PIttman has kind of made it clear they just don't want to overspend to keep the guys on their roster, which again is fine, but I just have a hard time believing that Arkansas is going to find a way to successfully manage the portal and replace all of these holes that they now have, because clearly there's a disconnect between what this coaching staff views financially as these players, quote unquote, worths, not to throw a shot at Mr. Larry, the Arkansas safety. But there's a disconnect between what this coaching staff thinks these guys are worth and what the players think they're worth, and what, again, other teams think they're worth. And so, again, it really just screams to me like they're going with the Moneyball approach. They're thinking they can spend smarter rather than, overpaying for one or two guys here. So again, you're going to have a lot of positions that you're going to have to replace, and we'll wait and see if Arkansas is able to properly do that. I mean, look, like I've said 1,000 times now, I will gladly eat some crow if in March we look at this roster and we're like, you know what? Damn good roster. I think they actually improved their talent. Again, I just don't really see a path to that. And if you don't believe me, Sam PIttman was asked in this press conference, what positions do you need to replace? John, do we have that clip?
I think I do, but I have to try to shuffle through and find it. But yeah,
well,
okay,
you can find it. But he was asked basically what they need to replace in the portal, and he was like, "Yeah, well, we need O-line, D-line, receivers, safeties, DBs, probably need some corners. Like I don't know." And so I mean, again, it's not that Arkansas is incapable of going out there and getting good portal guys. We've seen them do that time and time again. They've done it every year. They've landed some nice portal guys, but I feel like you're entering an offseason now where what they're going to have to accomplish is way larger than what they have in any other season. And clearly, as I mean, Sam PIttman himself is pretty much saying there is a disconnect between what they view as value and what these other players view as value themselves. So I have a very, very hard time believing that Arkansas without a GM is going to be able to wheel and deal successfully and not spend a ton of money, but also improve the roster. I don't see how you do both.
Well, let me provide a quick example here. So let's say we'll use any of those guys who are, going and visiting Ole Miss, right? So hell, I don't know, Kudus, for example. Okay, so he probably came in there and said, hey, this is my number now. And Sam Pittman goes, no, that's 4 to 5 times higher than we think it should be. So good luck going out and finding that. So now you're saying that this dude is not worth what he's asking for. Well, Ole Miss thinks he is, right? And so Ole Miss is going to go out and get a guy, and he's going to pay him that much. So the guy that you don't think is valued as that much, you feel like you are now going to go get better than him. He's getting the money that he's asking for somewhere else. So you're going to have to pay that much, chances are more, to go out and get an upgrade over him. I think that's where the disconnect is for me. So if we're talking about replacements or whatever, then maybe you can get close to what you had or about what you had. But yeah, like if you're really going to go out and get guys who are more talented and better fits, better players than what you're losing, you're going to have to pay more than you're letting these guys go for. It just, that's why it doesn't add up to me. And maybe they just really sat down and said, hey, you know what? Cam Ball and Xavier Sorey and Taylor Green and Carmona. Those are the 4 guys that we're going to give them a boatload on raises, and everybody else can just get the hell out of here and we'll figure it out from there. I don't know, man.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting also because I've seen some people doing the thing, and Sam Pittman kind of alluded to it, of why would we pay for this one guy when we can go out and get 2 or 3 guys for the same price or whatever. What that means is you're going to get 2 or 3 guys that are worse than Patrick Kudus to replace a starting guard. You only need 1 starting left guard. You know what I mean? So you might as well just keep the really good one that you have. Now, I get it. If he's asking for $1 million or whatever, all right, fine. But like to your point, Curtis, he's going to get that somewhere. And so like you're just content to let rivals in your division have that guy that you had on your roster because you didn't want to pay him. But at least you get 3 D2 guys. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't really, the math doesn't math for me.
Well, and I'll throw it in where your specific example about Kudus, I think, is a good one, because Luke Has, for instance, Luke Has is a great player. We all know he is, but you had him and you didn't utilize him. Mm-hmm. So losing out on him is not saying it's not a loss, because it is, but it's one of those things. Well, he wasn't really making an impact because you chose not to get him involved in the offense, and he's moving on. And same thing with maybe Satania to another degree. Yeah, I'd rather him be here, but maybe you didn't utilize him as much or whatever. But a Kudus thing, that to me, no, you pay that man. You pay him because he's a bona fide great offensive lineman. And so you can maybe go get another, if you're not going to utilize a tight end, then you don't need somebody of the quality and the price of a Luke Has. If you're not going to utilize Satania or feel like you can do better than Satania in the portal at wide receiver, then okay, I get that. But someone for Kudus, to me, that no, you gotta make that happen, because that's a guy that can make a difference on your team every single play. Because there's a big difference between having someone like Kudus out there and then replacing them with someone that's 70% of Kudus. You're giving up sacks, giving up, not being able to run the balls effectively. That has an entire impact on the game more. So I understand you're trying to pick and choose your battles and pick and choose the players you want. But to me, if that's what it came down to with Kudus, I'm going to be pretty pissed off if you had a chance to keep him, but you were like, no, we can just go get somebody else. No, you can't. You can't. Pay the man, because he's worth it. He showed he's worth it. And when he's on that field, he's a difference maker for your offense.
Yeah. And I see a lot of folks in the chat who are really caught up in the Kudus aspect of this. I get it. That was just an example of the overall problem here in terms of the disconnect or the amount of difference or the lack of being in touch with the market, comparatively speaking, to how Arkansas is valuing these guys. Maybe Sam is right. And these Arkansas guys are the ones who are just all, crazy in terms of what they think they're worth, or their agents are feeding them a line of shit there. And they're not going to get that elsewhere, and they're going to come crawling back, or Arkansas can get better players for half the price, or maybe he's right. I just don't think he is. I really don't think that's how it works.
I just don't see how you're going to upgrade talent-wise if you're not going to pay more. And hell, I mean, this is the same guy who, when they played Ole Miss, was complaining about how he had the blue light special offensive line, and how, Ole Miss in particular was the Louis V team that was paying their guys and all that. He's like, well, they have way better players because they paid for way better players. So now you have the same guy who's coming to us today, and he's like, I'm going to try the blue light special thing again, and hopefully we can just get more players. And look, I get the whole thing of like with Luke Has in particular, you don't want to pay for him, and so you can maybe get 2 tight ends that match his production. I can actually see the case there, but like when it's your offensive line, which was your biggest weakness last year, you're going to try the blue light special thing again. I don't see how that's gonna be a great way to go about it. And again, everyone that's saying like, oh well, last year they replaced a lot of guys. They didn't have to replace 10 starters from the portal alone. And that doesn't even include the Andrew Armstrong of the world, the Jaquindon Jacksons of the world, who are just graduating and going on to the NFL. I think Arkansas has more to replace this offseason, and it seems they're like going to try to do the same Moneyball mentality. And I'm not saying it can't work. I'm not saying that Arkansas is going to be horrible next year, but it's definitely not going to be. You're not going to increase your talent that way.
It's also way harder, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, to go from a talent perspective to be a 4-8 football team to a 6-6 football team than it is to go from 6-6 to 8-4 or wherever everybody feels like this program should be headed. That is a big part of it to me. And then everything you said about just the volume of contributors that you would like to have back that aren't going to be back.
I would also clarify, by the way, so Pittman said they have 29 visits scheduled right now. We know about a handful of those. Obviously, some of those are, being kept quiet. So we'll see, again, how these visits play out. But I have not seen the name of a visit that really moves the needle for me. Some of them are nice players. I think the Sharp kid from Fresno State who's visited this week, I think he's a nice player. I think the tight end from A&M, nice player. I'm intrigued by the Oregon guy, but none of those guys, again, are like the guys that are being recruited by every SEC school, the guys that you're going to have to fight off Georgia and Ole Miss and Bama to get. Those are the guys you're fighting off of, like Minnesota and Colorado State, and like you're beating those guys of the world. So look, I'm not saying that there's not going to be any high level talents that they bring in, but like it would be a lot easier for me to get behind this blue light special mentality if I were seeing big time players connected to Arkansas that are coming in on these visits. And I think there's a reason why none of the national reporters are reporting on these visits, because I don't think they're being offered by the SEC schools that we know and love.
There's no reason for me to believe that going with this route, and I know we keep referencing Moneyball, but that's what it is, going with this Moneyball route, that this is going, we got, that we actually have Billy Bean in store. Like we got Billy Bean, the one that's doing this. And, there's nothing for me to believe. It sounds good in theory, I guess, but it's like, do you really trust, and have reasons to trust that Pittman and the staff and everybody involved is going to get the right players in there to do what they're trying to do? I don't. I mean, sure, I guess it could happen, but a dead clock's right twice a day too. Like we don't know if they're going to be able to do it. So it's just a matter of, hey, trust us. It's kind of what it's about, is just trust us. We're going to do this. The GM thing, I know it's been brought up a lot. He was asked specifically, Sam PIttman, about a GM, hiring a GM. Couple comments, couple clips here, but we'll start with just questions about, hey, have you thought about hiring one?
I think so. Obviously, Mr. Yurchek and myself have talked about a general manager. We have a criteria for why we just, we're not going to do it until probably, if we do, it would be April or something like that. But myself and the people in the building, I don't feel like we are behind there at all. I don't feel like we're behind in the portal. I don't feel like we're behind who knowingly is available. But that is a conversation that Mr. Yurchek and I have had.
Okay, so you feel good about it where you're at right now, that you don't need one. But then if you did do one or hire a GM, it would be in April. So I'm wondering why. So what would make it happen where in April you decide to do it? Why not do it now? Or that's something that just really, I didn't understand. It's like, I can understand if you said straight up, no, we're good without GM. We got confidence in what we got, everything. But then you say that and then go into, well, I mean, if we did do it though, it'd be in April. I don't know. That kind of was a weird comment to me.
Yeah. I don't know. That was a strange one too.
I mean, so a big part of this whole plan, because like, look, guys, for people that, because I know we're being a little negative, a little condescending, a little bit skeptical, which like I feel like we're rightfully justified in being skeptical. But like, if you're making a plan for like why this is a good thing and why Arkansas is going to handle this well, it's very contingent upon Sam Pittman and his staff having a very good understanding of how to navigate this very well. They're going to have to really, like, if you're going to do the Moneyball thing, you're going to have to really do it well and be very smart and very intentional with every move you make, every dollar you spend. I just personally feel like a GM would be helpful in that. And I think there's a reason why 14 of the 16 SEC teams have a GM. And a lot of those teams that do have a GM are the ones that already have some big time portal commitments. Hell, even Mississippi State, who's coming off of a 2-10 season, they have a GM and they currently have a few portal commits. They just got they're about to get Jackson Arnold. Like, they seem to be kind of at the forefront. I mean, Ole Miss is already you see a lot of big time guys connected to them. So I'm not saying that Arkansas can't do well in the portal, but it just seems like a big piece of the puzzle would be knowing how to navigate this. I just personally feel like a GM would help. And I agree, John, that getting one in April, obviously, I mean, if you can get a GM whenever you can get it, it helps. But I don't understand what getting one in April does in terms of building the portal class right now. Cause like they need to be crushing it like this weekend. So we'll see how it works out.
Yeah. And also a few other clips here too, that we'll play. We know the reports of, speaking of like Kudus and Has and Braxton, all them visiting Ole Miss, and Sam Pittman was asked about, is it frustrating seeing players that, you either let go or didn't want to pay or got into the portal, going and visiting other SEC schools. How does that impact you?
Yeah, it is. And I'm sure it's frustrating to them whenever we do the same, but it just comes down to a staff decision on, are we going to be able to improve our team from 6-6 if we give this one, the amount of the money there, because they're going to get better. The kids are going to get better, but how much better than the 6-6 can we get unless we go with portal available kids? And, as you know, we've been pretty good in the portal. I think our 4 SEC players were all portal transfer guys. We're very confident that we can do that again, but we wouldn't have had financially, and we've got money, Trey, but we wouldn't have had financially the money left to go out and get what we might consider big time difference makers had we just said yes, 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 yes. And if we had said that to every one of them, as much money as we have, we would have ran out.
So kind of went into that a little bit too of seeing it and it's like, hey, what happened? They're probably frustrated when their guys are coming in. I don't know how much that's actually happening.
You still have to replace them, and that still costs money. That's what I'm not understanding here.
Yeah.
It would be a lot easier to get behind all of this if there was some type of returning presence in place. And like, again, I think people are overlooking the difference in like the variance that goes between Patrick Kudus, a Luke Has, and Isaiah Satania to some of these other guys. Like, for instance, Brad Spence. If Brad Spence is coming in here and trying to strong arm you, even though he wasn't even a surefire starter, I get that. I get if Dallas Young is trying to strong arm you into money. Yeah, I get all that. But it just seems like some of these guys, I would have liked to maybe hear them out and make more of a concerted effort to try and keep them so you have some semblance of continuity. And again, like we just saw last year how hard it is to replace an offensive line in particular through the portal. And so I would have thought that they would be going out of their way to like try to avoid that at all costs. But it seems like they seem like they have it figured out this year, and they've got a way to do it without spending the money that other teams are spending.
I'm just at a thing where if you got the money and if you got plenty of money, which he says he does, and I'm going to believe him. I'm going to believe that they do have the money. This is where this portal is going to really be telling, because if you say you have the money, okay. And if you did not pay, a lot of these guys are probably demanding more money than you felt like they were worth. Okay. So what is this going to look like? What is this portal overall going to look like? What are these players going to look like? That's what I need to see. I want to see what these guys are going to look like when they walk into the door and how good that they can be. Because you just coming out saying we got money, but we're not spending on the guys that are leaving. Okay, so I have to see it in the portal. You got to showcase to people that, like, yeah, we do have the money. Not getting a bunch of players that nobody wanted or no other SEC schools even look at. You got to get some dudes out there too.
Right. And Big A, I appreciate your comment here, man. He says the guys they replaced them with probably won't want as much. How is this hard to understand? It's not hard to understand, but you tell me if it's hard to understand then that they won't be as good. as the guys who are leaving. That's how it works. Like, do you think it's just like only the Arkansas Razorbacks are the guys who are asking for a lot of money here? No, that's not how it works, man. That's not how it works.
That's kind of where we're at, is like, look, you can say you don't want to pay your guys and you don't want to do all this and all that, but that's fine. But you're not just going to circumvent this whole thing and improve your roster and not spend money. I just don't think you can do both things, frankly.
No, you can't. You can't at all. This will be the last clip we play, and then we can get some chats if we want. But this is Sam PIttman's message to the fans. I think a lot of people wanted to hear this because fans are, understandably and justifiably, concerned and scared and mad about everything. Well, here's what Sam PIttman's message is to you.
Well, I think you're 100%. Hell, they're not the only ones that we're in, because I'm the one and our staff having to make all the decisions on, and we're not stupid. We know if a guy like a Luke Has walks out the door, it's going to mean something. Hell, it meant something to us. It meant something to him too. It was very difficult for him and his family. But the decisions have to be about the team. It can't be about just the individual. It has to be about the team. So all I would say is, all I would ask is that they just be patient over these next week and a half to see whom, if I can not bite off more, I can chew. If we get out of the portal what I think we can get. And if we do, I think they'll be very excited about that.
So did you like his message to the fan? He felt like that was the right thing to say with his opportunity for a message for the fans.
I don't know what else he could have said.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's got to be the message though, right? It's like, hey, we get it. Like I'd be freaked out too, but understand that we have a plan and we know what's going on in this portal. And we feel like we can go out and get guys that you're going to be excited about. I don't know what else he would say. It was just everything that led up to that statement that makes me wonder if that's the way it's going to play out. That's all.
Yeah. And like, honestly, like John asked me earlier today, he was like, what do you want to hear from Sam PIttman? And it was pretty much that, along the lines of, I understand why everyone is upset. I understand why you have questions, but I think I can figure this thing out. Let me go out there and see if I can do it. Which, again, that's about all you can really ask for. And I agree. We've said it coming in that, like, there was no path to Sam doing this press conference today and all of us coming away and being like, yeah, all right, we're good. We're good. Like, no matter what he said, we were going to find a way to be upset about it, and it wasn't going to please everyone. And so I get all that. And so, like, look, I'm perfectly fine to do the let's just see what they get in the portal thing. But I just have a hard time believing what you're going to get in the portal is going to equal a better and improved roster. And I think we all agree Arkansas is going to need to have a much better roster if they want to improve their record going into next year.
Yeah, how I feel about it is he said what he needed to say. You can agree with it or not, you can like it or not, but he said what he needed to say. Now it needs to be about action. We've heard from him now. We've heard what he's had to say. Now it needs to be about action. So from your point out, like, you better start all the things you just said in this press conference about what you're doing and how you're doing and how you're handling. Okay, it better have results for it. We better see some results, because if the next week or so you still have a couple of guys that leave that you don't want to lose, and then you're adding pieces that really don't max up to what the guys that you had that you lost into the portal, it's going to be hard pressed to have anybody believe that you know what you're doing.
He put a timeline on this. He did that himself.
Yep.
He said, talk to me in a week and a half.
Yep.
And see how you feel. So, okay, I'll do that. And we've said all along, as for a while there, everybody was hitting us with the, you guys are so negative and everything. We're like, listen, we're just reacting to what's happening, which is all of Arkansas's good players leaving. But we've been very honest about the fact that it's cyclical. Like, this is the time where everybody leaves, which means right after that is where everybody finds their new home. And so guys are going to find their new home, and it's going to be at Arkansas. And they'll get some good players. Are they going to get enough? Are they going to get the type of impact players he's talking about, getting a few major difference makers? I cannot wait to start talking about these guys, and hopefully they go out there and do it. We'll see. But he said a week and a half. So, before Christmas time, Arkansas fans should be feeling better about what the Razorbacks are going to be looking like.
And
according
I
to
think
him.
he also threw out the timeline of a few days because I know that obviously they have a lot of guys that have visited this week, and I believe this weekend is set to be a pretty solid visit weekend for them from the transfer portal regard. So I think on Monday morning, even not saying you're going to have a team or anything, but there should at least be some steps forward. At least, and we can have a much better idea of what kind of direction this thing's headed in, who they're going to be able to replace. And look, it's again, Arkansas's had some good portal classes. They've done a good job for the most part of replacing some outgoing talent in the portal. I just think like you're not going to be able to replace, you're not going to be able to get a whole new O-line, a whole new D-line, a whole new secondary, and a whole new receiving core without spending a decent amount of money. And so I just felt like it's almost like counterproductive where you can force all these guys out and everything, but then you're just going to have to overpay in the portal to try. I don't know if you can really whack-a-mole every single opening that you have.
They won 9 games, and then they had a really great portal class, and they won 7. And then they had another really good portal class, and they won 4. And then they had another really good portal class, and they won 6. So, it would have to be above and beyond what they've done. That's all we're saying. Like, I assume that they're going to get a good portal class that'll at least be in line with what they brought in the past. Okay, but is that enough to get you where you want this program to be? Because they had the incremental improvement this season and went to 6 games, and people weren't having that. That's not the standard anymore. So it's got to be above and beyond that.
And I would also clarify that, like, as much as we're talking about the portal and what all they're going to hit, and like you just said, kind of that laid it out well, that like the portal hasn't been Arkansas's issue. Their portal classes have actually been pretty good. What's caused the issue is the fact that they don't have any high school guys that they've developed that have stuck around and really helped out. I mean, I think we now have it at 5 contributors over the last 4 recruiting classes that are still on the team, which again, I don't think that's sustainable. And again, no matter how good your portal class is, it would need to be like top 5 in the country if you're going to really overcome not having any type of returning veterans on your team. And we've shown, I mean, from the 2022 class or for the 2020 class to the 2023 class, you weren't able to retain any of those guys. I mean, hell, 2023 was 2 years ago, and there's only 2 guys left from that class. So I have a hard time believing that they really have it all the pieces in place to just kind of build around with transfer portal guys. Because again, we mentioned that 2022 transfer class a lot that only had 9 or 10 guys. He even said they're going to need 20 to 24 guys. I think it actually might end up being a little bit more than that.
All right. So a few of your chats, folks, before we wrap up here, but I did laugh about this because it kind of shows how a lot of Razorback fans feel. Because like Cash Flow Thrift is like, you want to know how I know I'm stupid? I feel better after listening to him. And then really close with our guy Logan. He says press conference could not have gone worse. I feel worse than I did before. So
we got some mixed reviews, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, and based on which question he was answering, you could probably say both of those things. I mean, because there were times in that press conference where I was like, okay, like I see the vision here. And then there were other times where he was maybe contradicting himself a little bit or saying something that maybe I just outright disagreed with, where I was like, yeah, this ain't gonna work. So I get it, man.
Yeah. 100. I kind of went through that roller coaster as well. There were plenty of times where I thought he said like the right thing and kind of what he needed to say. And I don't really have much of an issue for the most part with what he said. I just, again, remain skeptical that they're actually going to be able to go out and get a good roster. Yeah.
Vids for me says, hate that we only got the clips John posted. Again, the press conference is fully up if you want to go and watch on Inside Arkansas. So you can check that out. Let's see. TB says, if players are asking for unreasonable prices, if they aren't extremely productive, then it's understandable. Of course, coaches have a part, but these agents actively seek out money during the season, which they do 100%.
And I think that those asking prices, though, like for the most part, I'm sure there are some cases where guys are just being ridiculous, but for the most part, they are being advised on what their market value is and what they can get elsewhere. And that's what they're going in there and asking for. So if Arkansas doesn't feel like that's a fair amount based on how productive they were, maybe somebody else does. And then again, like my question comes to, is it just Arkansas guys who, aren't understanding where the market is? Like, are these other transfers who are going to come in, have more reasonable expectations based on their levels of production? I don't know that's going to be the case. Also, like, for example, I thought that they were going to lock up Raylan Sharp while he was on his visit. And now all of a sudden he's going to Tulane on Saturday. So is this a situation where it's just a kid who, wants to go explore all his options, make sure he's making the right decision for himself? Maybe so, probably so. Or did he get in there where Arkansas is thinking, hey, this is a dude who played for Bobby, pretty productive, a guy that we can, probably play in our 2 deep at receiver. And then he, blew your socks off of what he was asking for in NIL, and you're like, maybe you should go check out your other options. Here's our offer, take it or leave it.
Well, dude, they better get that kid, because he was like the main reason why everybody in the fan base was like, F Isaiah Satania, get him out of town. We got this kid from Fresno State and Missouri State that's going to crush it. And I actually like him. I think he's a productive piece. He'd be a nice wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4. But I agree, Curtis. I wonder. I was a little surprised he didn't commit on his visit as well.
Also, just a few more comments here. Is this Pete from old intern Pete?
Hey, Pete.
Pete Royer? Okay. Says, we're not losing them because we don't have money. Some kids we left because of money, but we aren't losing them. Let me be clear, because of money.
I mean, yeah.
Again, look, like, and that's a hilarious comment from Pete, which I like. Again, he used different terminology where he said he spoke about them thinking that some of these kids' acting prices, they weren't worth it. But he also said they want money that we can't give them. And I'm assuming that some of those, it's a case-by-case basis. But he point blank said, if you listen close enough, that there were guys that asked for money that they could not give, which I feel like, again, kind of speaks to the situation that they're in.
Yeah.
And also, Gary says, John, Curtis, Andrew, do you have a question you would have asked if given the opportunity at the press conference? I assume is what he's referring to.
That's a good question, Gary. And this is my opportunity to say, I know, it's not just Arkansas media, it's media everywhere. Like, they always get accused of not asking the tough questions or whatever. For the most part, everything that needed to be asked of Sam Pittman was asked. The only thing that I would have probably asked is about Braylon Russell, maybe in that whole situation, because that was crazy. And yeah, like, in some ways there could be, I know that everybody just wants, like a reporter to go up there and be like, what the hell is wrong with you, man? Like, what are you doing? Are you stupid? That's just not how it works. Like, you have to have professionalism and tact. He was asked about all the people leaving. He was point blank asked, like, about Kuda specifically. And was it him or other guys who surprised you after he said what he said about, coming back if you redshirt him? I mean, he was asked, like, are you surprised at the asking prices here? Like, is that throwing you for a loop? I mean, there were a lot of really good questions, I thought, asked today. There are a couple other things I might have asked, sure, but I thought they did a good job.
Yeah, there really wasn't much. Which one, by the way? Like, I think in my 4 years covering Arkansas sports, I think I've asked Sam Pittman 2 questions total at press conferences. Football press conferences, there are just no shortage of people asking questions. So it's very rare that I'm in there and I'm like, man, I'd really like to ask a question. And honestly, back in the day when I was transcribing, I used to get annoyed when people would ask questions, because I'm like, dude, we don't really need to do all this. But no, I thought that, like, for the most part, most of the questions were asked. And I'll also just add this, like, Dave Van Horn is the only coach that I consistently ask questions to, but I've gotten way better stuff from Van Horn outside of press conference settings. And I honestly, like, the stuff that I would want to talk to Sam Pittman about, which would include some football stuff and some real life stuff, I would want to do it off the record, frankly. I would, like, a press conference setting, it's really tough to kind of what we were talking about earlier, to ask a question and get a real answer in a press conference. And so honestly, like, a press conference is not really where I would want to be asking questions.
Have a cold beer and a bar side chat with Sam. That's where you get your answers.
Well, I can tell you what question I want to ask. I want to know what he thought about playing Texas Tech in the Liberty Bowl, and what he thought about the matchup is what I would have asked. So I don't know what you guys are all talking about. I was getting to the hard hitting ones.
This is a good question, by the way. Because, I mean, well, the answer is yes.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. He also, now, he was asked about this. He said that of the 10 full-time coaches they have on staff, he doesn't have any inclination that any of those guys are going to leave. Obviously, there was, the Bobby situation, and he even said to Tom it was a loaded question when he asked him about it. But yeah, it seems that Arkansas is keeping their coordinators. If they didn't at this point, it would be, again, a really bad sign, because Sam Pittman just went out there and said, yeah, we're keeping all of our coaches.
Yeah, it would be. It absolutely would be. All right, guys, any final thoughts? Any final things? I know I'm doing a lot up here.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's several other questions in there. I'm sure that we're going to continue to talk about this tomorrow and so, in some upcoming shows, because he was asked about how the hell are you going to make this work for the bowl game, and just different things about the offensive line, whatever. Like, there's still a lot to get to. But what everybody cares about is, why is your entire team leaving, and how are you going to replace them? And so I feel like we covered that effectively, and that was good. And appreciate everybody for tuning in. I am in Connecticut in a spare bedroom, and I'll be flying back tomorrow. Looking forward to getting back home.
Yeah. I don't have much else to say other than I will just go ahead and like say it for the 1 billionth time. I'm going to keep repeating myself here. I'm willing to let this play out, and I will gladly eat crow if Arkansas goes out there and just crushes it in the portal. We'll see what this roster looks like in April. But my stance has been and remains, I'm very skeptical that Arkansas is going to be able to improve their roster. And I didn't hear anything today that would really change my mind. But I'm also okay with Sam Pittman with what he had to say.
Yep, and I feel the same way, and that's why you're going to have to keep it right here at Inside Arkansas, because anytime that any positive news happens, which will happen, we're going to have it covered right here. Inside Arkansas going live each and every time, so be sure to subscribe to us here on YouTube, as well as all of our social media at Inside Arkansas. Check out our website, InsideArkansas.com as well. We'll keep it going then from there. So for Andrew Ellis and Curtis Wilkerson, I'm John Neighbors. Same sports show, same sports channel whenever the next thing happens, but hey, we'll see you then regardless. Appreciate it.